Cool.
And then did you want to just bring your presentation, like just maybe that you can access? The stuff that you have in the shared drive.
No, I've printed it all out.
Oh, it's all printed out, okay.
Yeah.
I've got a few, I'll just throw these up.
Okay.
They can either hang out in the background or. Again, these are just talking points. And again, feel free to like hop in and if you need to manipulate anything, you're more than welcome to. I'm ready when you're ready. Sure. Sometimes the girl like and walk away. I can work with that one.
Okay. And we don't have the slides, right? So.
No, not any. Okay, they're just talking points. And then I'll share the screen for Zoom whenever we're
Okay.
we should start.
Yeah. What do you got? Well, we might as well get started. I mean, we'll work them so they can. All right, so what are we doing here?
And then just share the whole desktop. Unless we only want to share the PowerPoint.
What are you gonna do?
Screen.
Yeah.
So anything that we do bring up, if I change.
Okay.
I know it's screen.
All right. Well, welcome to the few that are showing up. I'm Professor Brian Stokes. I teach the cybersecurity program. This is Robert Fleming. He works in IT.
Yep.
And we're doing this to kind of give some information about cybersecurity awareness, basically tell people we're going to try and keep it very low level. We're not going to get very technical. This is just some hints and tips for you to stay safe. And then we're recording this and we'll post this up as well and share the link with everybody else in the community at a later date. So I'll let Robert start it off and I'll pop in here and there. There are, you all saw this, so hopefully there are some handouts. At the end, we're going to do a raffle. So sometime, yeah, by the end, oops, just put your name on this. And we've got a little hacking book and we got a backpack and a little, we'll explain what the dice key is and a little hardware crypto key as well. So some technical type of stuff. So
All right, so let's
Take it
get
away.
started. So, yep, I'm Robert Fleming. I work here in the IT department. I'm currently an assistant manager of infrastructure technology. So I work a lot with the networking, the switches, all the infrastructure that runs the internet, the access points, stuff like that. And we are experiencing some weird, with the, not at the college, but like you'll notice the internet, Microsoft and Blackboard might be a little wonky today. So we'll get started with our agenda. So some things that we'll talk about, phishing, that's a big one. Social engineering, we'll talk about passwords, safe browsing, browsing in public Wi-Fi, the things that you need to kind of watch out for, and VPNs. So some fundamentals of cybersecurity. In this presentation, we'll explore some of the fundamentals when it comes to cybersecurity awareness and staying safe in an increasingly online world. The more we do, we're finding, we're connected digitally, and there's a lot of steps that most people can take to make sure that they're in a better security posture. One thing that I do want to talk about, and this is kind of from an InfoSec standpoint, this is really the biggest thing that I'll touch upon, is the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and access. And anytime you're talking about cybersecurity, this in one way or another is incorporated to a lot of the things that you'll do. It includes protection from unauthorized access under the confidentiality portion, protecting data on your systems. Obviously, people want to protect their data and make sure that only they have access to it, or the people that they want to have access to it have access to it, not the people they don't want to have access to it. Integrity, making sure that your data is not manipulated in any way, whether it's credit card numbers, phone numbers, social security numbers. You don't want that data manipulated. And access, you want to make sure that you have access to your data, or someone, like I said, somebody that you want to have access to your data, but no bad actors. You don't want them to have access. So one way or another, a lot of those concepts will be incorporated in a lot of things we talked about today. Anybody know who this is? I mean, it kind of says on the screen. But was anybody aware of this person or heard of them before? So they used to be, I mean, they might still be one of the most famous hackers.
he was on the FBI's top 10 list.
Exactly. And he was very good at social engineering, and he does talks and seminars today. He went to prison for a while, but he's now, I mean, he works with the FBI, and he's helping a lot of law enforcement, find out what people do and what to watch out for. So one of his quotes: companies spend millions of dollars in firewalls and secure access devices, and it's money wasted because none of these measures address the weakest link in the security chain: the people who use, administer, and operate computer systems. And they're, he's to some degree absolutely correct. We can spend all this money, but if, and not to name any names, but if somebody from finance hands over the keys to the kingdom, there's only so much that you can do to stop that from happening.
And Kevin, really, when you look at his story, he was not super technical. He had some technical skills. He understood the phone system really well, but his greatest strength was he could convince people to give him information that they wouldn't normally give. So he would call like the phone company and sound like he knew what he was talking about, and they would get admin passwords, you get access. So it's really, that's kind of what Robert's saying with this quote is, if you look and sound like somebody who knows what they're doing, people will just naturally trust you and give you information. So the ultimate thing that I try to tell my students is be suspicious. If something seems odd, be suspicious. It's like, why is this person asking me for this information? Why are they calling me? Why did I get this email? Always stop and think for a second, why did this happen? This is, if it's anything outside the norm, you should instantly question whether or not it's legitimate. And that's what's happened in the past. You read in the news, like companies who have, there's the biggest risk right now is something called business email compromise, where somebody will send an email saying, hey, can we send this vendor, $500,000 to this new account? And the person didn't check to see, is this a legitimate email, sends the money, and then turns out, oops, I wasn't actually supposed to do that. There was one I was just talking about in one of my classes the other day. It took them about a month to figure it out. And by that time, the money was gone. And so they actually had set up a new account for this vendor, sent the money, and the CFO said, I never requested this, but the they sent a spoofed email to the person that was paying the bills, and the money was gone before they realized what happened. So you have to be really suspicious about things that are outside the norm.
Yep, a lot of times they'll change just like one letter or make it look very close to the original email of the person you might interact with. And that's how a lot of times, you know, when he says they spoof the email, a lot of times that's how they trick you into engaging in those conversations and divulging information you wouldn't otherwise. And we'll actually talk about that with this next slide. We've kind of got an example of, you know, what to look for in a phishing email. I'm sure everyone here has seen a phishing email or received a phishing email. They'll include things like a fake logo, and it can look identical. You know, I mean, you can find these images online. You can set up an email to look as professional as possible. A lot of times we'll receive, you know, the college will intercept emails where they'll have a login for Microsoft Office, and you click on that link and it takes you to a website that's just like a Microsoft login. And that's where you'll put in your credentials, but your credentials aren't going to Microsoft. They're going to, you know, a foreign nation where somebody has taken your credentials now. Now they're able to log into your account. And once your account is compromised, what they generally do is they'll use your account to further send emails, because you're a trusted, you know, insider. So people will trust emails that come from you, but they don't know that your account has now been compromised by a, you know, threat actor. So other things that you'll look out for. If you don't have a PayPal, there's no reason you should be receiving emails like this. And that's other things to look at too. Dear customers, if they're going to, they know you. Yeah.
They'll costumers. It's not
Yeah, costumers.
the new spell check.
If you see misspellings, that is, you know, a clear giveaway that this email is not legitimate. And fake links. One of the best things that you can do is just hover your mouse over these links. And if you see crazy URL, you know, if something comes up and it's like, it's not from that
Really long.
Yeah.
URL.
at, you know, xyz.com, you know, it's not a real link. And generally what we recommend, you can report them, you know, if you were here at the college, you could report them to help desk or your IT department.
Yeah.
I
I do that all the time when I
Yeah.
get those. I
Yeah.
instantly forward to help desk and say, hey, this came in, you might want to watch for.
Yeah, and then we look, you know, there's only so many technical controls that you can put in place. They're not 100%. They probably never will be. You know, we build a wall and threat actors build a higher ladder. So it's a constant cat and mouse game. So these are some things that you should look for when it comes to phishing emails.
And to give you an example of where this has just happened, some of you know Kevin Manna. So Kevin is, he has a condo up in Vermont because, you know, he's a ski nut. And so he told me just this week, he called me, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, and said somebody on the condo board got an email with one of these phishing links, and they clicked on it and it popped up a log into your Microsoft account, and it was a bogus login page. They compromised it. They took his email and they created a new email with the number 1. So like it was B Stokes at Northampton, now it says B Stokes 1 at Northampton. You probably have seen those. I mean, I've got students that because somebody else came here with the same name, they put first name, last name, and the number 1. So it's totally normal to see that. And what they did, the really sneaky thing is they set up a rule on the legitimate person's email to delete all the emails and forward a copy to this new fake email address. And then they started sending emails out pretending to be this person. That just happened this week because they weren't paying attention and they fell for that link.
And that sort of goes hand in hand with a type of social engineering. So we'll talk about some of the things to watch out for. And one of them is unexpected calls and emails. If you're not expecting a phone call from your bank, you know, verify that number, you know, make sure that it is actually the bank that's calling you. A lot of times, when I get phone calls like that, I hang up and then I will look up the number for whatever, you know, my bank, and I will call them back directly and say, hey, you know, is this problem that you reported actually legitimate? I verify with that. They'll try and get you to do something. You know, you receive a message from an unknown number that says, hey, can you send me the code that you just received? Or for example, Kyle, you know, somebody that used to work here reported that when he sold something on Facebook Marketplace, what they did was they looked up his email address and then said, oh, you know, we'll text you to communicate or call. And then what he noticed was he got a code sent to his phone with a password reset. And the number that was attempting to buy or trade an item for whatever he was selling said, hey, could you just give me that code? And that is a way that they'll try to social engineer, try and get you to do something, give them the code so that they can gain access to your account, compromising your account. They'll often use a sense of urgency, like, we really need to, you'll receive an email, for example, where they say, we really need to get this purchase order in on time. Can you please send me the account number for XYZ thing? They'll try and push that as, they'll use stress as a way to get you to do something. Random multi-factor authentication requests. I'm sure, if you use multi-factor at weird times, you might get a random multi-factor authentication request or a password reset request. And generally what that means is a person maybe was able to get your email and your phone number and successfully log in with the password. But when you receive that authentication request, that's generally where it stops. But what you can take away from that is your password's been compromised somehow. So let's say it's your Facebook account. What you want to do is then change your password. Don't reply to anybody. Don't put in that code, because then it will change your password or allow whoever knew your email, phone number, or password to then get in. You want to do it only when you expect to receive that request.
The other thing I recommend too is if they have security questions like your bank or Facebook, change those too. You want to change everything, because once they've figured out what your security question answer is, they can then try to do another password reset immediately after you change it.
Yeah, if you're using something like your favorite pet's name as a security question and you're posting pictures of Fluffy, your dog, maybe don't use that as a security question. You don't want the answers to your security questions to be public knowledge. And then, yeah, like I said, verify phone numbers and addresses from your bank. You get a phone call from the IRS. I've gotten a phone call from the IRS. It's not the IRS. They're not calling from another country.
Especially this time of year, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You get those emails like you failed to file your taxes, call immediately or something like that. They're looking for relevant events. That happens all the time. Like with the Ukraine conflict, there were a number of phishing attempts out there, like donate to help the Ukrainians, and they're bogus links. So I actually got one. This was a couple of years ago, but I got a check in the mail with instructions like, hey, deposit this check and send 10% of it to us and you can keep the rest. So I immediately called the bank that was on the check, talked to the bank managers, like, yeah, those checks were stolen. Somebody keeps printing out these checks and sending these things out. And if I had deposited it, it would have bounced. I would have been out those fees. And if I had sent that check, the guy would have made money off of me sending a legitimate check. So again, if you don't expect that kind of stuff, be suspicious. Like, why am I getting this check? Why am I getting this phone call?
Absolutely. Passwords. This is a big one, and a lot of people are guilty of it. I don't think I use short passwords anymore. So don't use short passwords.
How long is, or how short is too short?
So basically anything under 8. At this point in time, anything under 8 is too short of a password. I say that, and I can show you this in just a bit. Passwords can be cracked using graphics processing units. They can run algorithms that create lists of passwords. If you have a list of passwords, a machine can just, if they know your email address, they can just blast through tons of lists of passwords within seconds and be able to log in. The way to deter that is using long, complex. They don't technically have to be complex, but it helps. Long passwords. If it's on a password list, you can search. You can look up a password you might use. For example,
I got enough of market.
Yeah.
I've been
like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Obviously, that's on a list. That people use. Some of the top passwords you can look up and see what people are using.
Look up, top, and there's always like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or QWERTY, the top row of the keyboard.
Exactly.
Those are always on the list. Yeah.
Any comments on password managers using those as a?
So,
Yeah.
I do recommend using a password manager. You do have to be careful, and you do have to use. I didn't put it on this slide. You do have to do your research on what password manager you're using, because sometimes, for example, I was using LastPass. I'm now migrating to Bitward. LastPass had a compromise. In most cases,
Somebody got the source code,
Yeah.
somebody got some customer information.
it doesn't necessarily mean that all of those passwords that LastPass was working with are compromised. However, that does give the threat actor the ability to crack whatever, passwords they were able to get. So if you're a target of a nation state, somebody with resources who can crack those passwords, you definitely want to change your passwords, pretty much all of them, as quickly as you can. Normally they're going after higher value targets, but still, it's definitely something to think about. And then something I recommend is using passphrases can actually make it easier to remember a password. So for example, if you wanted to put together something like unicorn tricycle toaster, that technically is a long password. You could throw in symbols just to break it up, but trying to crack something like that with a standard GPU and password cracking solution, it will take technically forever to do that. And I'll kind of show you the example I have here. So if we go to this website, and you can do this. If you put in, you don't have to put in your password verbatim, but it will kind of give you an idea of how long it would take to crack a so let's just try a password here. TGHL. So you can see as we're going through, it's going to exponentially increase in time. 5 M number sign.
Hold on a second.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One more.
7 characters.
8. Okay. So there's the typical language. 8 characters, lowercase, uppercase. 3 hours.
It would take 3 hours to crack that password.
Too short.
Yep.
Too easy to crack. It's got to be a lot longer.
And when you go, so that's 8. Let's go. So 2 more characters brought 3 hours to 12 days. If we do 56, just adding 2 characters is now brought it to 3 years. And I kind of like to think of it like you don't necessarily need to have the most complex password. If it's going to take someone 3 years to crack a password, that's time that they're generally not going to waste. When it comes to security, it's kind of like running from a bear. You don't want to be the slowest person.
Let's try one of these. So I've got Bitwarden, which is one of the password managers. I told it to create a passphrase. So it connects, it has 3 words and a number and some dashes. So why don't you run this one?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick. So it's capitalize each of the words, clone. Just capital C, not the whole.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, so clone dash hand cart. Number 2 dash superjet. Superjet.
I mean, it would take basically forever. So,
Yeah.
On a modern password cracking platform, they're not going to waste their time.
But the nice thing when I tell my students is saying, make a password something easy for you to remember and hard for the computer to guess.
Exactly.
Uppercase, lowercase, number, that complicated thing. It's hard for us to remember that, but you could probably all remember clone, hand cart, superjet within a couple of minutes. So it's not hard to remember 3 words connected together as opposed to a bunch of scrambled letters and numbers. That's not something that we can, you don't store those types of information in your brains.
That's one of the biggest things that we can recommend.
So Bitwarden actually does that for you. Like when you want to create a new account, you just say, hey, I want a new password, and it just generates a new random password for you. So you don't even have to come up with the words, it does it for you.
So some safe browsing and, using public Wi-Fi. Things you got to watch out for. When you go to like Starbucks and they don't have a password on their Wi-Fi, anyone can connect to that Wi-Fi network. And that's something to think about when the network isn't configured in a way to have visibility of other devices. So that's where our network, our public Wi-Fi differentiates from something like Starbucks. So on our public Wi-Fi, we do not allow devices to communicate with each other. So just because two computers are connected to the same public Wi-Fi source, they can't talk to each other. The only thing that they could talk to is the internet. So they're not able to capture and sniff some of that traffic. Well, actually, all of that traffic in between. So, being able to see other devices leaves you vulnerable to, having your information collected. Generally, we recommend using a VPN, if you're connecting to public Wi-Fi sources, and that's to not only protect your data, it encrypts the data. So even if that data was captured, it would be encrypted. And anybody, it's almost like cracking a password. It takes a substantial amount of time to decrypt that data. They're also susceptible to evil twin attacks.
For that one, like a VPN, there's a lot of popular ones out there. You may have heard of like NordVPN. You get ads sometimes. I use one called Fastest VPN. I signed up for that one because I got a lifetime subscription. It's not a monthly thing. I paid like $30. I can connect 5 devices forever. So you just pay one time and you don't have to keep paying a monthly. So you can, kind of browse around and figure out which one fits your needs best. Yep. But that's it. All you do is just connect to their server. You download a little application and you connect, and I can connect to they have servers all over the world, like, France and England and all over the US. And so just that way, all my traffic's going through their servers and is encrypted. And if it's intercepted, it's unreadable.
Yep. Oh, evil twin attacks. So these are kind of interesting. Anybody can create a network with an SSID. So an SSID is the name network. For example, NCC public Wi-Fi. That is the SSID. So if somebody creates the same name and there's no password on it, your device technically thinks that is, when you connect to a remembered network, it will automatically connect and associate with that network. That can be done with things like these. And you can buy these online. They're not illegal. What you do with them could be illegal, but this is called a Wi-Fi pineapple. And what this does is it broadcasts, a Wi-Fi signal, and it can actually, when your phone has Wi-Fi turned on, it can broadcast, oh, I remember this, Starbucks Wi-Fi. And this will pick that up and say, oh, I'm now broadcasting the SSID Starbucks Wi-Fi. And then your phone will automatically associate with this device. Whether you're trying, actively connecting to it or not, just having your Wi-Fi on, will just automatically connect. So you can pass this around if you want.
The most notorious one for that is like airports.
Yep.
You figure people are traveling.
Yep.
Hopping on, checking their accounts, things like that before they board the plane. And so I'm sitting there with an access point that says free airport Wi-Fi.
Yep. And
somebody connects to that, and I'm now capturing all the data they're using to try to log in.
Yep.
So you want to be really, really careful about free Wi-Fi. The way to avoid that is, of course, if you're using a VPN, because the traffic's still encrypted.
Yeah, even if it's passing through that device, if you're using a VPN, your data from it leaving the phone or a laptop to where it's going is encrypted. So even if it was captured, again, it's very difficult to break the encryption.
Quick question on the VPNs. Are you advocating that for public Wi-Fi only, or do you think it's a good idea also in your home?
It depends.
Yeah, it depends on your paranoia level.
Yeah, sure.
With the one I have, I can actually go to my home router and set up the information on the router so that everybody that connects to it is always encrypted when they go from the router
That's
out.
good enough. That's what you're saying.
So yeah, so you won't even notice it. It really isn't much of a speed difference, especially if you choose one. Like when I log in, I can choose like New York, Chicago, Miami. So they're pretty close servers. There's not gonna be a big delay. Like if I'm connecting to someplace over in Europe or South America, there'll be a little bit longer delay. But if you're choosing a US server, it'll happen pretty quickly. So you can just leave that on all the time so that you're always encrypted. Yeah.
Your question wasn't for the airports, wasn't there like an incident for like hijacking?
Yeah, that came out just a couple of weeks ago. That's actually an old ploy. It's been around for a while. But yeah, so what that is people who, oh, my phone's running out of power, and they've got those little kiosks where you can plug in. Well, if you plug those in, there may be malicious software installed on those devices that'll infect your phone.
Yeah.
What they recommend is use your, mine's over the top, but use your charger.
Yep, you're on. Yeah, and a lot of times when it comes to like cybersecurity, the types of attacks aren't new. It's just you generally hear about them when they become more prevalent. So
Yeah.
use your own
Use a
USB
brick or
battery.
your battery or whatever, yeah.
Well,
Do not plug a USB cable into a device if you don't know what it is.
yeah, pretty much.
So like at the airports, I know like a lot of the seats now have those little things at the bottom of the seats has a plug and a USB. Use the plug. Have your little power brick, plug it in, because then they can't infect it. But if you plug into the USB port, there's always a possibility there's a network connection to your phone now.
I don't have one on me at the moment. I do own a couple of these, but what you can do, if you really do want to use a public charging station, is you can buy USB adapters. It's just a pass-through, but it completely, like, it only has the power as pass-through. It removes the data connection portion of those USB connections.
Right, so if you look at a USB cable, you'll see like 4 little copper things inside. 2 of them are for power, 2 are for data.
Yeah.
So the power only cables will not pass any data through to. But a lot of people, the cables they carry around, like the ones they got with their phone, do power and data.
Yes.
And so that's where you get infected if you're not careful.
Exactly. They're called data blockers. So, and you can just, they're a couple bucks. You can buy them online if you're really in a pinch and you want to be able to charge your devices.
Right.
So that's pretty much what we're seeing browsing. We'll talk a little bit more about this stuff. So this slide is more dedicated specifically for VPNs. We talked about a lot of these already. It enhances privacy. So if you're doing something, you know, not nefarious, but if you don't necessarily want your ISP or any of the parties in between to know what you're doing, it helps with that. Changes your geographic location. So as Brian was expressing, you know, you can technically make it look like you're connecting from another country, another state. And this helps with things like geographically blocked content. For example, Netflix, you can only watch certain shows and movies in certain places. This technically is a way to bypass that.
Right. So if you were traveling out of the country and were trying to get a US feed, you can connect back to a US server
Exactly.
with your VPN service and still watch Netflix.
If you're working remotely and you don't want your boss to know that you're actually in Cancun on vacation, you can say, nope, I'm connecting right here.
Yeah.
Um,
And I kind of compare it to, you know, old school, like when the difference between a postcard and a letter, right? You send somebody a postcard, anybody can read it. You send somebody a letter, they've got to actually open the envelope to see it. That's kind of what a VPN is doing, is you're putting it in an envelope. So not that, like Robert was saying, not that you're doing anything illegal, but it's like, hey, I don't want everybody looking at my traffic. That's my traffic. So you're just kind of protecting it and keeping it private.
absolutely. You know, as with everything here, do your own research, find out what works best for you. If you're going to use a product or service, sort of vet it, make sure that it is, you know, reliable and trustworthy. They can also, as Brian was saying, you can set them up for individual policies or individual applications on your router or your firewall. That's a little bit more advanced, and obviously we won't be talking about that too much in this course, but you can do very specific routing when it comes to firewalls. Not all of your traffic has to go through. Other important tips, and I like to try to let everybody know. Updates, keeping your operating system up to date is incredibly important. I know sometimes it's rare, sometimes updates can break things, but it really is important when it comes to security of your devices, is making sure that the operating systems are up to date, whether it's Windows, iOS, your phones, all that. Try to keep it as up to date as possible.
So like in Windows, you'll see that little red shield down in the lower right corner. When that pops up, you should click on that and see what's going on. It probably says, hey, I've got some updates for you. Mac is the same way. It'll pop up in the little settings and say, hey, there's updates available.
And they do push pretty critical and important security updates fairly often. Firmware of your devices, when it comes to like routers, stuff like that, try to check, make sure that you're running the latest firmware on your routers. That's your gateway to the internet. So at any point in time, if it's vulnerable, you know, threat actors are actively scanning the internet to see what devices they can compromise and infect. Security updates for your BIOS, that one's a little bit more advanced. Most of the time, BIOSes aren't being, you know, compromised.
Yeah.
Your browsers, make sure Chrome, Firefox, whatever browser you're using, try to keep that up to date.
Let me add too on security. So if you have Dell is really good about this. So I know that, you know, like faculty all get Dell laptops, but if you have a Dell computer at home, You can go to the Dell support website and put in, there's a little code on your computer, like with a 6 or 7 digit numbers and letters, and look up your laptop.
Serial number.
And it'll tell you if there is a BIOS update. And usually that's just download it, run it, and then install. The only requirement is you have to be plugged in, because if your battery's too low and it's in the middle of updating BIOS, you can basically turn your computer into a brick.
Yeah.
But as long as it's plugged in, it's relatively easy to do BIOS updates on Dell computers. I can't say that for all computers, but Dell's really good about supporting those types of things.
Exactly. That I should have deleted. That was just part of the PowerPoint. Actively exploited. Yeah, actively exploited vulnerabilities. I use the template. So it is good. Again, this is a little bit more advanced to check. There's websites that will tell you these devices, these services are actively being exploited. I think NIST has one. We'll look probably right up the slideshow. We can look up exactly which websites. I like to use the Hacker News to kind of see what news related to threats and vulnerabilities is going on. They list a lot of good information there. I find the information interesting, but that's just me. And I think it's always important to kind of make sure you're educating yourself. Cybersecurity is not something that it's not a secondary thought anymore. You know, it's not like the 90s where we'll build a program and then we'll worry about the security of it later. Security really is at the forefront of a lot of products and services that are being built now. And it really needs to be taken seriously, because the more we're connected, the more vulnerable we are to
I mean, historically, like Microsoft, it was always an afterthought. But the last couple of versions of Windows have been a lot more. So, you know, my Windows XP was like Swiss cheese, had a lot of holes, had a lot of errors. And Windows 7, Windows 10, we don't see as many of those things coming up because they kind of rebuilt everything from scratch with security in mind when they did it. So that's good.
Exactly. I learned some of the best stuff that I've learned through YouTube. It's free. You can go on. There's tons of channels and people that are dedicated to teaching people about cybersecurity. There's a ton of great courses. Especially they have sales all the time on like really good material, whether you're studying for certification or you just want to learn about, you know, a specific topic. I've used Udemy. Books, obviously, podcasts, really interesting information for even like your average person. There's a lot of, it's almost like when they do those murder mystery podcasts, Darknet Diaries.
We are those.
Yeah, it's, I mean, that's.
It takes me anywhere like in the car. It's like, what are you listening to?
Yeah.
Murder.
Yeah, exactly. And audiobooks. I mean, there's a ton of different avenues that you can take without spending a bunch of money. You learn and enhance your cybersecurity posture.
Sometimes there'll be sales and stuff. I've got a couple of titles that I picked up. I got one on, you may have heard the term blockchain. That's a big thing with like, these currency exchanges, stuff like that. I bought this course on blockchain. It was $5 or something like that. I got an email. It's like, hey, this is on sale. Why not? Yeah, it's got like, 15, 20 hours worth of content. It's got videos. It's got, downloadable stuff. So yeah, you can find stuff like that pretty easily.
Quick question, you mentioned about the Windows updates, and that's important, I get that, but is that a source of vulnerability too, where somebody puts up a fake, is that, you have to be careful about that too?
They haven't figured out how to fake, so where you're gonna see weird things like that is like if you're in your browser. That just happened actually last week. One of my students was like, hey, can you take a look at this? And I went over, he was looking at a website and this thing popped up, Microsoft, there's an error, call Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's gonna be in the browser, but the actual, like when you go into like Windows update in your computer, it'll tell you, it'll go out and talk to the micro server and say, that's pretty protected. Okay. Nobody so far has been able to figure out how to fake that. It's gonna be those browser pop-up messages that say, call this 800 number, and you're calling somewhere in India and they're convincing you to open a bank account, weird stuff like that. So.
Okay, very good.
This is really just a summary slide, but it really doesn't take a lot of extra effort, especially when you know what you're doing, to put yourself in a better cybersecurity posture. Using longer passwords, using passphrases. I'll talk a little bit more about, actually, I have a slide here about some of the stuff that I use, but Yeah, just doing a couple extra things really makes you much less of a target. Threat actors, hackers, they're really gonna go after the easier targets, people that are not using strong passwords, people that are, actively divulging information on public networks and stuff like that. That's really, the easy targets are really what they go for.
Yep. And the other thing too, like I was saying in the beginning, is be suspicious.
Yep.
They understand human nature and they go for things like fear and greed and things like that. So when you get those emails that from the IRS saying that you didn't pay your taxes, or I had one actually last year. I got a phone call. So we were talking about how sophisticated they're getting. I live closer to Philly, and so Pico Energy is our not PPL up here. So I got a call from Pico Energy customer service. It looked like Pico's number because it had 800 and the first 3 digits and the last 4 were different. And it's like, that looks legitimate. And they started talking to the person. They wanted to sign me up for a program because I've been paying online. They're going to knock like 20% off of my bill. Okay. And then they start asking like, what's your account number? What's your social security number? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Why do you need that information? And they hung up on me. And when I checked the number, sure enough, 800-543, and then the last 4, they just spoofed that number. They can also spoof very quickly. So Kevin was telling me about, I think it was his dad. He had that same thing where he was called by this, somewhere in India probably saying, your computer's, got a problem. And so Kevin told him, it's like, why don't you call the state police and tell them? So the state trooper he talked to said, when they call back, tell them to call me. And so his dad says, hey, the state police want you to call. Like, no, that's not what I said. And so he gave them the number. And like 5 minutes later, the state police called back. It was them. It was the scammers. They spoofed the number and they said, oh yeah, this is Sergeant so-and-so. It looks okay. Go ahead and give them the information. So that's how quickly they can fake information. They can fake phone numbers. They can fake email addresses. Because there's tools out there that do it very, very quickly with very little effort. And so they're getting much, much easier to do that.
Yep. So I'll just talk about some of the products that I like to use. You do not have to use these same products. When it comes to a VPN, I use private internet access. I've had a good experience with them. I used to use Tunnel Bear. They got bought out by a company. And again, when I say like do your research, look at, read the policies of the companies that you use. Find out what information they're divulging, what information they're sharing. When it comes to a VPN, you want it to be safe, you want it to be secure, you don't want them sharing your information. Malwarebytes is one of my top 2 preferred anti-malware platforms. I also use Norton, but the ads, it's weird. You buy a product and you would expect not to get ads from them. You still get ads when you buy them. They're a great anti-virus tool. They find a lot of stuff that other anti-malware platforms don't find, but yeah, I don't like
my experience with that is it's you take a performance hit too.
Yeah, you do.
A lot of junk they add on. So yeah,
so if you're, and especially if you're using a lower, I don't want to say lower ends, but just not like a high-end computer, it really does depend on what kind of platform you put on, because you could take a performance hit. I use Glasswire for internet traffic monitoring. That will warn you of things like if you're connecting to a network and it's an evil twin, I'll get a notification that says this network has the same SSID, but it's got a different MAC address. Are you sure you want to connect to this network? So that helps protect against evil twin attacks. I like to use GL-INET products. I will actually bring those up. It's kind of easier to show you than. So this is a brand of Wi-Fi devices, routers. So when it comes to connecting to public networks, you can buy one of these like little mobile routers. If you are only able to connect one device to something at a time, what you can do is
tells they limit how many devices.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of spin up, it's almost like using a hotspot on your phone, except it's actually a Wi-Fi device. These can be battery powered. I wonder if I have one on me right now. But I mean, super convenient. It definitely helps when it comes to, your, this one's that. You can actually pass this around. This one's an LTE hotspot. So again, it's just like a phone. But what I'm able to do is I'm able to load my private internet access account information onto that. And then with the flip of the switch, all of my data is going through that VPN. So when I'm at an airport or out in public, I can just connect to one of those and I don't have to worry about my traffic being intercepted or, using public Wi-Fi. They make a bunch of products. Again, some of them are like normal routers, Wi-Fi routers that you would expect to see in a home. Some of them are more niche products, something you would use in an RV or when you're out and about like that. So I like those. Go into too much more detail there. I use Firefox as my preferred browser. There's a couple add-ons and Google Chrome, you can do the same thing. I like to use certain browser add-ons to enhance my privacy and my security. I use Privacy Badger, which blocks certain, for example, like Facebook, will actively try to pick up cookies and stuff like that to identify who you are when you're browsing the web.
Oh, yeah. They look at your IP address, like your outgoing IP address. My wife always knows, like when it comes to like Christmas or birthday, I'm out there looking for presents for her, and she's like, "Were you shopping for watches?" Like, oh, man, because Facebook starts popping up ads for like Swatch and stuff that the websites I've been to. So as soon as you go to a website, that cookie identifies who you are and your IP address, and then all of a sudden they start sending ads out. So every time she gets on Facebook, she knows what I've been browsing.
Exactly.
So.
And it's not necessarily device specific. I've had, I'll be looking for something on my computer and all of a sudden on my phone, I'll get ads for what I was looking up at the, it doesn't even have to be the same program. Like on Amazon, it's like another service knows this is what you were looking for on this device. So I like to kind of reduce that by using add-ons like Privacy Badger. HTTPS is really important. Let me actually talk about that for just a moment. This add-on is like kind of archaic, but the technology behind it is not. You definitely want to make sure that anytime you're browsing a website, it is very important that you see the lock and that your connection is secure. If you're going to an HTTP website and the lock is unlocked, that means that if there was something in between, capturing that traffic, it's like a postcard. You can see the data that's being passed between point A to point B. So it's important to make sure that your connection is secure and that the certificates are valid.
The good news for that is most US sites have that, because I do that in my class. I used to have a list of sites that were still using HTTP, so like plain text. Most of those have changed over to HTTPS, but sometimes you'll get other countries that don't really do as much of that. So if you're going to like Amazon or your bank, it's probably got a lock on it. But there are some other websites that still do not.
Yeah, I found some websites like that. Usually I take out.
Yeah, yeah, small, like, a small business that goes like, has a website built. I think the last time I was demoing that, did I demo that in class, Marco? Was it like Chinese websites?
No, I don't think you demoed it.
Okay, there were a couple of Chinese websites that, you went to and they didn't have a certificate, and so it was still plain text.
It's okay, actually, browse those websites if you're not passing any, important information. But if you have to sign in and it's HTTP, just know that traffic can be intercepted and that it can be used by whoever.
Not a credit card or something.
Yeah, no, if it's HTTP, don't even put your credit card information in. Virus Total and Joe Sandbox are two websites that I like to use when it comes to making sure a URL link is safe, or yep. And if you have a small file that you want to upload, you can upload, like if you're like, I'm not sure if this is safe, you can upload to this website. It will scan that file against 40 or 50 different, malware services, malware bytes, like all of them. And then you'll get a list of, okay, this, if 49 out of 50 of them say it's safe, chances are it's safe. If 1 or 2 say it's not, there's argument that it's still safe, but URLs, you can do URL. So like if you have a link that you're not sure of in an email, you can copy that link, paste it in here, do a search, and it'll tell you if it's with most times, again, there's always argument that it might not be safe, but it'll tell you if it's a safe website or stuff like that. And Joe Sandbox is more of a tool that I use when it comes to links on an email. What it'll do is it will generate a simulated operating system, run the link, see if the link does anything malicious, see what connections are being made. But again, that's a bit more advanced. But yeah, that's some of the services and products that I use. I think we wanted to save some time at the end.
Yeah, just
Specific questions.
any questions that you have or anything that the topic we didn't talk about, you want to ask a question about?
I have a stupid question.
No stupid questions.
Technical person.
No, that's fine.
When you talk about cookies.
Yep. Cookies are,
And you go, you'll go on certain sites and it'll say, accept all cookies. Except. What's the best?
generally,
thing to do?
generally,
What I do.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Most of the time, accept the cookies, because if you don't, the website won't operate properly. But what I do is I have in my browser, when I close my browser, I have it wipe all those out. So while I'm connected to that website, it works, and then I close the browser and gone. So when I log back in, but that means every time I log in, you have to log back in. And like if you do Facebook has a bunch of cookies there. You have to log back in every time, but it's better to do that than to have all that stuff sitting on your browser, and then they can track where you've been and stuff like that. So you can actually do that, like Firefox actually has in their security settings. You can say when you close the browser, what do you want to do? And you can delete all content, wipe the cache, wipe the history. So it looks like a brand new person is connected.
And it is browser specific. I'm sure Chrome has the same, a similar method.
It does do it automatically.
Yeah.
You have to you can put a little button on the bar that says delete, but Firefox will do it automatically when you close.
That's one of those reasons I'm sort of preferential to Firefox. Google wants information, they want to know about you, they want to know who's using the computer, they want
That's
to.
how they make their money. Google makes money off of you knowing who you are.
And that's the thing about a lot of these tech companies, they'll offer products and services for free. When their products and services are free, you are the product. That's where they make money. They technically make money off of your information. So that's something to definitely be aware of. When it comes to cookies, my preference is I actually do hit the customize. I will say, strictly necessary cookies is always checked, anytime you're visiting a site, but I'll do functional cookies and performance cookies, but marketing, I leave that unchecked. It's very rare that I can say, no matter what. And then, like you said. Yep.
Thank you.
Another example too. So I was telling you, like when I go out shopping and my wife starts getting ads, it goes the other way too. She bought some makeup, and I now get emails in my inbox every day from this makeup. Yeah, I've never been to their site. I've tried to unsubscribe. I can't unsubscribe. So they're very persistent
Yes.
activities.
They have, super cookies, and that's like, you can't even delete them there, so.
Any other questions?
Kind of an open
Of course, I
question.
forgot, VPNs, that protocol was IPsec it uses.
Usually, yeah.
I'm just trying to remember, I don't know, it's reading.
Yeah, so it's a tunneling protocol. So and it has a couple options for which encryption algorithm to use, but usually they use IPsec, which is kind of the tunneling protocol. Classes they're used. So I've got 4 prizes and 4 people. So I was gonna do like a raffle, but I can just offer who wants what. So I've got a book called Linux Basics for Hackers. So it teaches you about Linux. So if you're ever curious about Linux and what kind of things you can do with it. Anyone interested in that? Or is that too technical?
I actually have that book.
I'm sorry, did you say? No, okay, all right. So I also have a backpack, Northampton Cybersecurity, so you can walk around campus acting like you're knowledgeable about cybersecurity. You're welcome to do that. I have, this is we didn't talk about, this is Dice Keys. This is an alternative. Anyone ever play Boggle? So this is like Boggle, because you can hear little things in there. What it is, though, there's a bunch of numbers and letters, and it allows you to create passwords. And there's actually an app. So in addition to what we showed you with Bitwarden, Let me see if I have my dice keys. There it is. So you start this app and you take a picture of the dice on your app and it creates a strong password, and you can use that to generate passwords for Amazon or Facebook or stuff like that. So this is a really cool idea. There's he's a computer scientist out of, I think, Stanford, created this, and what you do is since people are bad at creating passwords, you use this to create the password, and then you can store this somewhere safe. And then if you ever lose your password, just take a picture of it again and it regenerates all the passwords. So that's something if you're interested. And the last thing I have is this is a USB device. It's a secure key. So we talk about like multi-factor authentication. You can actually use this as the key. So in order to log into a website, you have to have that key plugged into your laptop because the key is actually built into the hardware. So this is actually more secure than like an SMS, getting an SMS message. So that's on. Okay, there you
I mean,
go.
unless somebody else wants it.
I've got a couple more if anyone's interested. So I'll leave these up here. If you guys on the way out, if you want to grab one of them, please feel free. For my new students, I've got more. Somebody else takes out. I got extra as well. So anyway, thank you very much for attending. Hopefully it was helpful.
Great, thank you very
We're
much.
gonna post this Zoom. I'll probably put it in like the dead end, so you see, I'll update the announcement so you can watch it later.
Joe Sandbox of emails, what's that all about? What's the value in that?
I can show you Joe Sandbox.
Somehow to manage your emails, is that what it's for?
It's a little bit more technical. Yeah.
It's key on carrying the bolt.
Thank you, Robert and Brian.
Thank you.